Carolyn Doobie here. What's the play for today? Well, today's play is brought to you by that thing that I wasn't looking for, I wasn't watching for, and then suddenly it happened. So I made a big colorful piece of paper and I decided to cut some hearts out of it. So I cut a bunch of hearts like this out of it. And I had an idea for the hearts. And by the way, do you think I've done that yet? No, I haven't done that. But after cutting all these little hearts out, the paper, the scrap that I'd cut them out of, well, I just couldn't stop looking at that. I fell in love with that. Not the hearts, but the scrap of paper they were cut out from. And I'm going to use that to make a piece of watercolor. Well, I mean, I'll use watercolor, so it's not really watercolor, but a mixed media wall piece. Wall piece, wall art, wall hanging. Well, heck, enough of my tongue tying. Take a look. Well, here's the wood panel that I've painted white that happens to very luckily be just about the right size for this scrap of colorful paper. Now, this is very floppy as I'm moving it around because, well, there are cuts in it everywhere from cutting out all the hearts. And the one thing that I noticed is this is close to the right size, but it's not like it's the perfect size for it. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm certainly not going to trim up the wood. That's not going to happen. So what I am going to do is mess with the paper a little bit here and make it really look like it wasn't meant to fit on there. So by just trimming a little bit here and there, it won't be that, oh look, it's almost the right size. It'll look like more it was never meant to be that exact size. Well, now that I've got it exactly where I want it, I'm going to glue it down with some gel medium. And you're probably wondering, why doesn't she just pull the whole thing off, slather the gel medium everywhere, and then put it down? Or I could put all the gel medium on the back side of the paper and then put it down. Well, the truth is, I'm never going to get it back in this exact same spot again unless I glue it down right where it is. That's something that I know about me. Every time I move stuff around, it just never quite, well, ends up in the same place that I thought it was. So I am just going to take the long way here and glue it down piece by piece, bit by bit. And by long way, yeah, what are we talking here? A minute, minute and a half? Yeah, it's really not that hard to do, but for some reason, it feels like the long way to me. Well, now it's time to put something inside those hearts, and I want to put the rainbow in there. So I grabbed some watercolors. These happen to be golden watercolors, but you can do this with any kind of watercolor. Now, one of the things that you may want to think about is letting things completely dry. I, of course, do not really seem to do that very well. So some of the watercolor that's there is mixing right in with some of the white paint and gel medium that wasn't completely dry before I started working on top of it. So yeah, you know I'm calling that one an oops, an outstanding opportunity presenting suddenly. Because now what I've got is a much milkier look to the watercolor instead of something super translucent. But what I do need to do is clean my brush off just a little bit more than I usually would because I'm picking up so much of the white paint. Now watercolor, cool thing about that is basically even if you leave it alone and it dries out, you can hit water on it again and it'll reactivate and get super wet again. Totally reusable. But acrylic paint does not work that way. So I don't want to get a bunch of acrylic paint mixed into my watercolors there in the actual tray because I don't think it's going to reactivate or wake back up when I get it wet again if it's actually got dried acrylic paint in it, if that makes sense. Well, all that open space, it definitely needs something in there. And to do that, I'm going to put a word in there. Now, I've got, oh, yep, and the paint is still wet. Am I going to wait for it to dry? Nah, you're probably noticing that trend with me. Now the cosmetic sponge that I'm using, one of those very fine ones from a drugstore, it's just about as wide as one of the words. That way I don't have to mask anything off because, well, that would be like prep work and patience and all that kind of stuff, and I'd rather just play instead of doing that. Now to get my cosmetic sponge to that magic size that you see, use the very fancy tool, the scissors, to cut it down to that size. I have a whole bunch at that size because I do this quite a bit, because I love not having to mask anything off. I'm picking a different word for each heart. Part of the way that I'm picking the word is by what its meaning is, does it fit with the other words, and the other thing is how long it is. So a word like explore cannot go in one of the itty bitty little hearts. Now, the way I just said that made it sound like it was some kind of written law that's been around for thousands of years. No, not really. It's just that I want the word to stay in the heart. Definitely a word could go outside the heart or on top of the paper, because sometimes I've done that too. But I want this time the words to stay in the heart. So joy, since it's a little word, went on a little heart. And this stencil, by the way, I totally forgot to mention this, is called Fridge Poetry, and I designed it for over at StencilGirl Products just for projects like this when you want an assortment of words to add into something. Now, if you've been enjoying this video and you would like to see more of my stuff, you can find more of my videos on YouTube, and you can find all sorts of resources over on my blog at acolorfuljourney.com. And while you're over there, check out my newsletter, because that includes some exclusive goodies that you can only get via the newsletter. Things like Sparks of Artspiration, which are downloadable and printable and yours to keep. Now, once this thing is all finished and completely dry, how am I going to hang it on my wall? Well, I could do things like get all the proper picture hanging tools out and that kind of stuff. Or, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to grab the Command Adhesive picture hanging strips. Basically, it's like plastic Velcro that you can stick to the wall and it won't damage anything. And that's how I actually hang almost everything on my walls. I'm trying to decide what would be a good title for this piece of art, and I'm drawing a complete and total blank other than watercolor hearts, and that's just not a fun enough title for me. So if you've got an idea for what you think I should call this, let me know in the comments section. I'd so appreciate that. Well, thanks for joining me for today's play. If you've been enjoying this video, give it that thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more of my videos, hit that subscribe button. And of course, if you'd like to see more of what I'm up to, head on over to the blog at acolorfuljourney.com. Thanks so much for letting me be a part of your colorful journey.